With the current macroeconomic environment, security budgets over the past couple years have either been frozen or flat. Where should CISOs focus these limited budgets to maximize the most out of their security program? In our first ever Say Easy, Do Hard segment, we invited Jon Fredrickson, former Chief Risk Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, to debate what should be in your minimum viable security program. Grab some eggnog and enjoy part one.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
From the Security Weekly Vault, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
All right, so here's the topic, and here's the primer for this. Jason, you say this all the time. Say easy, do hard.
Yep.
Because we talk a lot about leadership, communication, what CISOs need to address and deal with. And I thought, wouldn't it be really fun to actually do the hard part? Mm-hmm. Like sit down and work through a problem.
Sure.
And provide the audience some guidance.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about topics that cyber hygiene, for example, best practices, for example. And, sometimes it comes across of, well, just do it. Just get it done. And that thought process is, it's harder to do than just to say it, right? Mm-hmm. You have to actually dig in and do the hard work. You have to bring your A game to a lot of this. Patching, so easy to say, but put that in an enterprise. Yeah. Put that in an enterprise, number one, that has legacy technology, right? That has needs that, they have to run the business on. So patching isn't that easy.
Critical infrastructure.
Right. I mean, think about healthcare, for example, manufacturing. There's tons of legacy technology. They just can't go out there and patch. They have to do the hard work.
Exactly. And I inspired this off of a LinkedIn post that Alan Alford did. So Alan Alford has his own, the Cyber Ranch podcast. So he does a podcast. He's been a CISO multiple times over. He sits on the Living Security Advisory Board. And when we were at the advisory board in October, he put a LinkedIn poll out and said, what's your minimum viable security? What are the core things you have to have in your budget as we go into 2023 in a kind of a $0 budgeting discussion, right? And we've been talking about this on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I said, wouldn't that be really great to debate? Like, what are the top things, right? And John, you were talking earlier about Alan. You actually worked with Alan in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. When he was at NTT Data, he was on the healthcare side. So Blue Cross has a hosting arrangement with them for our .com infrastructure. So anytime there's any things that I didn't went bump in the night on the .com side, I would call Alan. So he's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. So Alan put this LinkedIn post out there. I'll put it in the show notes so people can go find the LinkedIn post. But what he proposed out to his CISO audience was, what do you consider your minimum viable security? And so I went through, I think it was 198 comments. And what I did is I tallied them all up and then I ranked them. And in this first segment, what I want to do a little bit is debate this kind of top list. What do we think those top things are in the minimum viable security? And then the second segment, we're going to break into some vendor conversations and talk about this a little more. So here's the results of that poll that he did on LinkedIn. So number one on the list was identity and access management, so I rolled in identity and access management, multi-factor authentication, privileged identity, and privileged access, PIM and PAM. Mm-hmm. That had the highest votes as number one.
And that's one thing now?
It's not.
I was
It'd be nice if that was in real life, right?
Okay, so it might be one thing based on what Toma Bravo's been doing earlier, but we can debate that in the second segment, okay? So that was number one on the list after all the comments. Number two on the list was EDR. And I grouped EDR, MDR, and XDR together because they kind of overlap. Now, we can debate whether XDR needs the endpoint or doesn't need the endpoint. Depends on whether you look at Forrester or Gartner, et cetera. But that grouping was kind of number two. Number 3 on the list was email protection,
Interesting.
which is the segment we just recorded.
Yeah.
Was on email protection. That was number 3. Vuln management was number 4 on that list. The next on the list, number 5, was SIM, UEBA, and incident response. I kind of grouped all those together because there were a couple, I think there was like one UEBA, and it's kind of been integrated into the SIM use case. And SIM obviously is supporting incident response use cases. So I grouped that. That was number 5. Then there were 2 tied for number 6, security awareness and training, and backup and recovery. So I'm going to stop there for a second and get some initial thoughts. Like, is that it? Are those right? Because I've got a list of another, oh my gosh, 15 to 16 that I guess we could put on to the minimum viable security list.
Is asset management and patch management a given in this situation?
So
That falls into vuln management.
No, so here, no.
No, don't say that.
Okay, so patch
Access and
management.
identity.
No, I think that's a really good question. So patch management came in right under security awareness and backup and recovery. So it came in at 7th.
So you just scan for vulnerabilities and you never fix them.
You don't patch them.
I guess. Now we could.
Or you don't know what to scan.
Well, it's
There's no asset.
it's an ignorance versus negligence discussion here, right?
it could be.
One of the tops on my list: asset management, CMDB, configuration management, vulnerability management, and then patch program.
Does
Yeah.
attack surface management fall into that?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I would say so.
Okay.
If we're consolidating all
Oh,
these
yeah,
things.
I mean-
So I did not combine those. So this is why I did it this way, because I wanted to get the feedback
Yeah.
from the experts, right? And then asset management was like 14th on the list as a separate standalone. Now,
Wow.
I agree with you, Jason. Like the whole, if you look at the common control framework, know your hardware assets and your
Yes.
software
Yeah.
assets is like number 1.
know what you have.
But asset management was way down on the list.
How do you do any of the others without it?
Makes me sad.
You do them very poorly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hence the situation we're in, folks.
I am happy to hear there was no firewall in top 5.
Yeah.
There, no, the firewall was tied
everything's
for
zero
last,
trust now,
by
though.
the way.
Yeah, is that zero trust just part of identity as well?
Yes.
Matt, just want to throw that in there.
No one actually identified zero trust by itself. Now there might have been a couple ZTNA discussions in there, but
And you know, a lot of it seems to be totally technology driven too, because I'm not hearing anything about risk management.
yeah.
I'm not hearing anything about supply chain risk. Like that's got to be part of the conversation. It's not just the tech.
I feel like you can do risk management, supply chain risk management for free. I don't need to buy something.
No,
right?
but it needs to be priority.
Yeah.
This is the top. This isn't just about buying things. This is about investing in programs.
I agree, and I think
as well, right?
and I think asset management. So I was always a believer that asset management had to include your third-party providers because they are kind of an asset that has to be tracked, right?
Sure.
So when we built Control Path way back in the day, I started with a third-party vendor management use case and realized very quickly, like, wait a minute, I can apply these same techniques to internal technologies. This is another type of asset that has to be tracked and monitored, et cetera. But that didn't even show up anywhere in this initial list.
Wow.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
How do you patch without a software inventory list? How do you know?
Well, you
where
can
to
you
even
can
do
rely on
vuln
your
management.
Well, you just spray and pray.
Scan.
Well, you know, just
That means there's no
pick 5 or
segmentation
6
then,
cider
right?
blocks and just get it done. I guess, right?
Yeah. So
Strategy for success.
So for history, John and I used to work together at Qualys way back in the day. So I mean, I guess right. As long
Everything's
as
a /8 in this top 5, I guess. That's
No
what we're doing.
segmentation, no VLANs. Everything's connected. It's good.
all right. So let's re-rank this a little bit, right? Because I agree with you, Jason. So you asked right before we jumped on, were there any surprises? Identity does not surprise me. I think this audience knows I'm an app user data guy, right? If I'm in the chair, if I were ever in the chair, understanding my applications, my identities, and their access to data would definitely be in my top 5. Application security was really low, was lower on this list. There's some DLP that's down a little lower on the list. Like
good with
those
that.
to me are like core areas that CISOs should have their arms wrapped around, because I said this in 2015 when I wrote the strategy document for Tenable, is as we move more and more stuff to the cloud, I may not own the endpoint. I may not own the network, but I'm going to own the application, the users who have access to those applications, and the data that's being served up, right? That's been my thesis for a long time, and I will stand by those. So identity did not surprise me being up there in the list, because I think this is one area that a lot of organizations still struggle with in getting their arms around application. You said, is that one solution? Yeah, we wish, right? Because it would make the whole app, the identity side so much
Can I
easier.
buy that? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, can you buy Zero Trust? Oh, it's only 5 SKUs, right? You're good.
I think that's the hard part, though. The actual, that's that say easy, do hard, right? Like identity in and of itself. You break down identity, and there's a lot of technology to do identity. There's a lot of technology to do MFA. There's all kinds of integrations, but doing that well and getting those to integrate properly where you actually have a handle on identity, you have visibility into who is using what, where, when, and how, and then you're able to correlate and integrate that into all of the other solutions. Like, that's say easy, do hard. Like,
But you
not
also
seen
have
do
to
it.
classify all of your assets. Assets meaning systems and data.
Yes.
Because how can you deploy least privilege if you don't know what those assets, like how to classify
No,
those
that's
assets?
once you've gained access, that's a whole nother
I
thing.
get it. I get it. I get that.
I do think identity is a unique area of focus, because it's one of the, at least for me, one of the areas that if you do it right, the business notices, right?
Yes.
If you do a firewall right, the business will never know, right? You do identity right, and you get single sign-on to the right people at the right time. You know, you can escalate privilege maybe seamlessly. The business says, this is great. There's an actual ROI to identity, right? And it's
An ROI for efficiency and buy-in.
yeah, absolutely.
To be
Unlike
clear.
some of the other tools,
Yes.
you know,
Right.
business could care less. Like, I don't want to hear about that. you know?
Right. All right, Jason. So what would you rank number 1?
I mean, I've always said asset management is the center of the universe. Asset management, CMDB for me. You have to know what you have.
Yep.
And assets are not just hardware.
Correct.
It's hardware, software, people, right?
Yes.
It's your data. Like full-blown asset management and CMDB is the center of the universe in my eyes. And I even bring it down to if you have API connections with third-party vendors, I consider that an asset that I want to manage.
Right.
Right.
1000%.
So all the way down to that.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and I remember the first Christmas party we did here in 2018 after I joined, and we had this debate around asset management, and I still stick to that. Like,
Center of the universe.
I don't know how you can't protect an organization without a good asset inventory. And to your point, it's not just hardware, it's people, it's vendors, it's software, it's all the components, because I can't protect what I don't know. And I think that is a challenge for a lot of organizations. They have no idea what they have.
Sure.
That includes cloud services, everything in between.
Yep.
All right.
So can you actually do good asset management right now? Is there solutions in order to get to this? What do you have? You think about all the M&A, you think about the different tenancies, the multi-cloud, the SaaS applications.
Right.
In fact, even go to single sign-on. Like, what single sign-on SAML provider are you leveraging for the access to this specific application and API? Like, who's managing those tokens? Like, can this be done with a single solution nowadays?
Maybe. We're going to save that for the second segment, so don't get too far ahead.
Teaser.
Okay. All right. So if asset management's first on the list, what falls logically behind it?
My number 2 is patch.
Patch.
I wouldn't even, if I can only do 5 things, I wouldn't invest in VM. I'd go straight to patch.
Really?
Interesting.
If you know where everything is,
Vulnerability management and patch. I combine
just
all of that
patch
together.
everything,
Patch
right?
everything. Patch vulnerability management. Right?
So let me ask a question, right? Because I've had this debate before, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, John. I don't necessarily have to scan to find a vulnerability. If I have a good asset inventory and I know what versions of software and hardware I'm running, I can infer vulnerability data from the NVD. I don't necessarily have to scan for it. Is that
that's exactly
real?
where I'm going.
Is
That's-
that real?
No, absolutely
I was
not.
gonna say, is that a solution?
God dang it! I thought we had something new.
If you've got a one-person company with one server, absolutely. But for this exercise, if I can do 5 things, I'd do patch over VM.
Interesting. Okay. So then, what's number 3 on the list?
So for me, it's managing your technical debt, which is the patching piece of it, keeping things up to date, your software up to date. But the other piece for me is identity too, because if you have technical debt, legacy asset that you can't patch, because it happens a lot, identity is the way you're going to help prevent
You have to control
exposure.
that.
You have to
Least
control-
privilege.
You have to control
It's
access.
still relevant, right?
It is.
Yeah. I'm just checking because that principle has kind of gone away up until recently with the whole discussion of zero trust. But least privilege has always been something we've talked
So
about.
I struggle
in the industry.
between those two.
You mean
Honestly.
ZTNA to defense in depth to least privilege to, I mean, this is the same thing 30 years in the making.
Oh my god.
Good old marketing departments.
Yes. All right. So we've got asset management, patch management, identity and access management. And I'm going to throw all the stuff around identity in that bucket for now.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you, John. Having, if I could get the world to understand that identity access and management and MFA and SSO and PIM-PAM are really one solution and not 4 or 5 different vendors, world would be nirvana for me. But so I'm going to throw them all in one bucket for sake of argument for this segment. Okay.
Yep.
All right. What's 4?
I like endpoint at 4.
I was going to say either endpoint or SIM, because you want the ability, like, as much as I would love endpoint to be secure, I think I would rather be able to respond and know what I need to respond to.
But outside of correlation, in this circumstance, don't you think a SIM is a nice to have, not a need to have?
And I almost think the right EDR solution can be a quasi-SIM in a pinch, right?
Yep.
It can be in certain vendor environments, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm just
That's what I'm
saying,
getting
right?
at. I'm trying to kill 2 birds with one stone if I know I only have so much budget.
I'm thinking from the attacker standpoint, like, think of ransomware, you think of from the OffSec standpoint, which is where I live.
Yep.
The ability to get onto an endpoint, yes, you have to be able to prevent and or see that.
Mm-hmm.
But once I'm there, say that's pretty hard, right? Like, I will always get into a place, I will always be able to compromise that endpoint, bar none. Like, we've proven that time and time again.
Right.
The ability to correlate where I've been and what I've done, I think, becomes one of the more important aspects when you look at ransomware and the ability to respond very quickly. Without the ability to see and respond to that next step for IR, does the endpoint really matter? Does the initial access point really matter?
No, but the EDR management suite does.
You're right.
Okay.
It does.
The EDR
So
management,
remember-
because now you can start doing threat hunting through the
EDR
platform.
Yeah.
Not just the endpoint protection, but now you have that holistic platform where you can start doing threat hunting.
All right.
And this is what I'm saying. The consolidation piece
Yeah.
for me is important, because if I had to invest somewhere and somewhere else didn't get an investment, I could probably get away with a good EDR.
Jason's
And
just
SIM
signing up on the Microsoft E5 license.
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
then
say
we're gonna call it a day.
But the SIM is very expensive from a technical debt and a resource heavy standpoint, right? Like, the ability to have a SIM to ingest all that data and store it, that's very expensive. And the ability to weed through that noise and then respond to it in a timely manner.
The peoples to do it.
Because that's the point. The time to remediation, time to detection threshold, from my standpoint and OffSec standpoint, if you can't respond and remediate me quickly, it doesn't matter if you've seen me.
Now,
You're done.
right.
And that requires tuning and baselining.
Tuning
and all
But you
based
don't
on
have
people.
backups yet.
Oh,
Right. Now, hold on. Now, remember, Tyler, remember how I structured this. I have EDR, MDR, and XDR. What is XDR? XDR is supposedly the
Supposedly SIM.
evolution of the SIM, right? So
Fair.
I structured it this way on purpose because I could see those correlating. So I put EDR, MDR, XDR, that bucket as number 4. Okay, for sake of argument.
It's another gimme. I like it though.
Yeah, come on. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. We could not do this in 2 30-minute segments, right? All right, so we're up to 4. What's next? Is SIM next in IR, or is XDR enough? Assuming that the endpoint detection response platform can give me some of the DR and the threat hunting and some of the other stuff, what else do we need to think about in this top list?
Can I
I
ask?
think your backups.
Gotta do
were-
backups.
BCDR is
backup.
huge. It's not just backups though. It's your ability to recover.
I know.
Yeah.
It's BCDR as a whole. Because you can have all the best backups in the world, but if a threat actor comes in,
Yeah,
and
you
breaks
ransom
the-
that.
Now what?
Yeah.
I know.
Send some overnight hard drives. Like how do you recover that?
What's your recovery strategy is huge.
Yep.
But my other question that I had was in asset management, because if it's not in here, then I want to separate it out. Are we actually classifying these assets in risk ranking them? Because asset management without classifying them and knowing where the risk is,
Yeah.
you're still behind the eight ball.
Man, what kind of unicorn are you building here? This is like we're gonna get some VC funding after this.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
It's interesting. We're building out the NIST CSF foundations right now.
Yeah, we are.
Right.
But again, I think this is what I'm not sure that everybody goes through this exercise, John, right? As you walk in as a CISO into an organization, there's a bunch of things that are already in your budget. There's already things that are there, and you're trying to figure out how to augment. Sometimes you don't go back and go, do I really need that? And I think this is an interesting
Well, this
conversation.
is the whole point of the
Yeah,
conversation.
exactly right.
It's easy to say, but it's really freaking hard to do.
Yeah.
All of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this. And this is why I say that all the time is you can sit back and say, we want XDR or EDR, but if you don't have the right asset management strategy behind it, if you're not classifying your assets, you're not doing all that hard work up front, you have a blinky light.
Yeah.
You have a blinky light. That's all you have.
Then implementing and tuning that becomes even more critical.
100%. And I mean, in some cases, depending on the technology, adoption of the technology. You can say you have it, but if you're not using it and adopting it, what good is it?
Well, if
Yeah.
your end users aren't using it or adopting it, and there's not buy-in
Yeah.
at the technical level,
Right.
then there's no point of the technology.
Look at my top bullet right there. Buy-in and adoption. These are important things. It's not just the technology
know.
investment. It's the programmatic. It's the program.
Yep.
It's building out a solid program.
Yeah.
So is that a cultural thing? Is there more? Does there need to be more time spent to integrate and get the buy-in prior to purchases, and or maybe during the purchasing process, where you have the input and the buy-in and the championship happening at the purchasing?
It's got to be baked in the RFP. Go even further.
All the way down to the RFP.
business needs to be part of your
It has
requirements.
to be in the
right?
DNA of what you're doing, right? So I have an entire section here on risk management. And the first bullet is culture. Getting stakeholders to be transparent and on board. Number one.
Yeah.
That's
It's
number
like
one.
I'm reading your sheet. Over
Yeah,
I can't
dude,
see
I
it,
mean-
but-
See, he did his prep work before this segment.
I take a lot of notes.
So,
not on paper.
Jason, so then the question becomes, is risk management then number 6 to bring all this stuff together or not? Like, what is the next thing on the list? Because I'm going to limit this to 6. We're not going any
I almost
further.
feel like we need to take every single one of them
gonna
and
say,
do
what
a
is your
sub-bullet
definition?
that says risk, sub-bullet that says risk, sub-bullet. I think it's part of it all.
What's the definition of risk management? Like, what are we referring to when we say risk management?
I
How
mean,
are
it's-
we referring?
That's
to
a
that?
huge conversation, and we actually have a chief risk officer here. And
What do you think of when you think of risk management?
Yeah. To me, honestly, it's all about business enablement, right? Like making sure that you're operating within your risk appetite, that you're driving down residual risk to that level to operate most efficiently and cost effectively.
You need to understand what the risk appetite is.
Absolutely.
The business needs to understand the risk appetite.
Yes.
The
So is that-
leadership and the board and all
I was
of
going
them.
to say,
need
is that
to
a
understand risk
conversation up
appetite.
or is that a conversation down? Is that a
It's
conversation?
both. It's both. I will
Exactly.
tell you, like, you know, I've been on a risk management journey for 3 years. We reinvented the program, and it's tough. It's a tough journey. You know, like, cyber is where my heart is, right? Cyber is one of the least important top risks I'm managing right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because if you think about risk management in its holistic definition, right? Not just from a cyber perspective. It's financial, it's reputation, it's fraud. There's operational risk. There's a lot of components into a risk management program. And having come out of the GRC space, I know a lot of those areas, right? And so, John, you know, it's interesting to have you here, and this is why I invited you here, is because you have a purview over the cybersecurity, the resiliency side, the backup recovery. Like, these are all important areas for you to run the business today.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's totally interesting. You know, cyber is a top risk, and you know, we report just like any other thing. But you know, we report risk in 4 categories: financial, operational, regulatory, and then strategic. You know, and regulatory is a big one too, right?
Sure.
If the
Right.
government wants to change their payment structures, or you know, the state of
Exactly
emergency
right.
is extended, and we have to do stuff with telehealth and financial planning outside of our control, right? A lot of our top risks are things that we can influence to a certain degree, but for a lot of times we inherit what happens.
Got it.
Yeah.
So should risk management be in the top 6 to pull these other 5 areas together?
I 100% think so. It has to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have to look to the future too, right? And to what John's saying is it's not just about cybersecurity risk, but a lot of cybersecurity leaders are starting to become responsible for aspects of overall risk management. BCDR, for example, regulatory and legal. We need to make sure we're aligned, right? But let's think in the future. ESG, environmental, social governance. We're going to have all of this IoT and devices out there pulling telemetry. This is the future of what's happening, right? We need to start thinking about that. That's another business risk we need to think about as cybersecurity experts and risk management experts. The federal government's going to come down and say, listen, you need to be managing your organization to these ESG critical controls. So we need to think future state. Risk management has to be there. How are we going to measure that? On your building management system, you're going to have IoT devices pulling telemetry.
So this isn't a technology. This isn't something that you can fix with a blinky box. This is a lot of policy. This is a lot of procedure. This is a lot of programmatic
It's a lot
building.
of process.
Yep. Yeah, we built it within our GRC platform, because it's been doing the same type of functions for a long time, and the business was used to interacting with that in a certain capacity. But yeah, it's conversations. It's not a cutting a check for a solution. There's no way.
So is this somewhere where like the BSO role then switches and becomes dynamically fluid in order to help do some of the business risk and integrate between the multiple teams that then have to have those conversations? Like how is this actually done in a scalable organization?
I would love to have a fleet of BSOs, but
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't afford that.
It's that point, though, that you have to have the evangelists in the business, though. That's the relationships that you start building around the business. So you have those evangelists embedded throughout the business units who can act as a BSO, right? They're acting BSO, maybe.
Yep.
But
So
they're
the
they live within
champions,
they're
you're building the
they're
culture.
champions, right? They're the future BSO. You have to have that. You have to be embedded in those business units. That's the only way you're going to get adoption.